it's been a bit like too much now lately. I've seen it go from like 12 to 15% to where you go somewhere and it's automatically 25%.
The pricing of food has gone up, so tipping has gone up.
It's a double-edged sword, but at the same point, we are getting a service. Here in the States, a lot of servers are making minimum wage. They depend on that tip. It's also the server and the establishment to give that service as well. So if you're not giving the proper service to your clients, do you really deserve that 20%?
Usually in Italy we don't use tipping because we assume that waitress and so on are paid by the owner of the enterprise, and so it's very different from here where tipping is requested to customer.
Now, today it's actually, you're kind of more forced into it. The moment that you pull your card out, they're like, it's on the machine. Do you want a tip?
When they flip the laptop around at you.
When they flip the little thing around.
You feel like you're watched, like somebody's, bearing down on you.
It's almost giving you that guilt feeling that if I do or don't, and I don't feel that that's the right thing to do in a business atmosphere.
It's really about the experience you have with the service person. Having waitressed and made a living that way through college and graduate school, but I don't like to have to do it and feel like I have to do it.
If you wait on somebody or do a service, absolutely you're entitled to a tip. When it's like a self-service culture, I don't know that the tip is warranted.
Normally tipping should be a reward towards a service or something that's exceptional, and it's almost like you're forced to do something that you may have not done because the service wasn't necessarily exceptional.
The advice I would give is if you don't have the tip, don't go out. And that's not really for coffee. I guess it's more towards restaurants, etc.
We've all been there. We're just picking up a sweet treat, perhaps, and then the employee flips over that iPad and you're met with the dreaded tip screen. Then comes the guilt and the question, do I have to tip? Some businesses often depend on the consumer to supplement their tipped employees' wages, and there are a lot of them, nearly 4.3 million tipped employees in the U.S., according to National Employment Law Project. As part of Yahoo Finance's Small Business Big Opportunities Week, we're breaking down the psychology around tipping, and Michael Lynn, Cornell University Professor of Services Marketing, is here to tell us more. So perhaps we begin with that very question. What are the do's and don'ts? What's the perhaps rule of thumb here that we should be deploying when we're kind of going tap of the button when that iPad is turned around?
I don't really like to tell people what they should and shouldn't do. I don't think there's a god of tipping, and I'm certainly not it. But I can tell you what people do, right? When people flip that screen, it's not just the anecdotes that you began this section with. Research tells us that people do feel pressure. They will leave a tip, but they're not happy about it. Okay? But what perhaps you don't know, or your viewers don't know, is that in these kind of counter service settings, the majority of people are still not leaving tips. Only for baristas, for restaurant carryout, and other counter service situations, it's typically 30 to 40% of customers who are leaving a tip, which means that most people are not. And I think you should take feel some freedom to join the majority if you don't want to tip.
Interesting. Okay, so how important is tipping, and how does it help small businesses as well?
I'm not sure that it helps small businesses as much as people think, because while it does save labor costs, those savings typically are passed on to consumers in the form of lower prices. So that the real beneficiary, what tipping does is it gets price-insensitive customers, people who are willing to pay more than they have to. They're effectively subsidizing the patronage of more price-sensitive customers who aren't willing to pay more than they have to. Because of tipping, those price-sensitive customers are getting lower menu prices.
And so all of these things considered, we were just taking a look at the screen here, and we had a graphic that we were showing our viewers talking about where people most often tip and who they don't tip.
Yeah.
What have you seen in some of those behaviors?
Yeah, look, we most often tip waiters and waitresses. We also tend to tip delivery people, bartenders, taxi cab drivers, people that we don't tip, no one tips effectively, people like doctors, tax accountants, lawyers. And then there's this middle group where a substantial number of people tip, but not a majority. And that's things like hotel maids, Uber drivers, and counter service. Even baristas, the majority of people aren't leaving a tip.
Should small business and even larger businesses as well that are in the service industry, should they be accounting for what an employee would make in tips and factor that into the wage that they're offering? And when do you believe we'll see that be a reality?
That is a reality. You're allowed to pay a sub-minimum wage to tipped employees, provided that they make up the difference in tips.
All right, Michael Lynn, who is the Cornell University Professor of Services Marketing. Michael, thanks so much for taking the time here with us today.
It was a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.